It's right up my street, it's my boulevard. It's right up my Straza, oh my God. It's garden right up there, ah, it's right up my podcast.
Welcome back to Right Up My Podcast. My name's Gwen Watson.
And my name's Kate White.
And this is the podcast in which we talk to fascinating people about the remarkable ideas that they have to make us feel good.
And we are now at the beginning of a new season of Right Up My Podcast. And boy, oh boy, do we have some good topics lined up.
We've got some absolute corkers lined up, haven't we?
We've got some beauties. We are talking about failure. We're talking about how to listen better and to be heard. We're talking about the law of attraction.
Yes,
we
are.
We're even talking about writing schmutty letters, but more of that later.
Oh my God, I'm excited about that one.
I know.
But this episode 1 of Series 3, aka episode 17,
yes,
is all about adventure.
It is. We are going to be talking to a fascinating lady called Belinda Kirk, all about why we need to bring more adventure into our life, not just for funsies, but because it's actually really, really good for us. But more about that later. Before we get to talking about that and talking to Belinda, let's have a little catch up. How have you been for the last 2, 3, 4 months, Gwen?
How long has it been? Do you know, when I started saying welcome back to Write Up My Podcast, I thought, oh my God, that feels like such a long time in between episodes.
I know. It's kind of still rolls off the tongue pretty easily though, doesn't it?
We've had a very long break. I will just mention straight away, we've had a slightly longer than planned summer holiday. We were meant to be back a month ago, but hey, life.
And now here we are. Refreshed.
And now here we are. So apologise
Ready.
for leaving you hanging. I hope that you, dear listener, have had an awesome holiday, an awesome summer as well, whatever you've been doing. And we are back, and it is lovely to see your face, Kate.
Oh, always lovely to see your face as well, although I'm feeling slightly full of self-loathing because before we came on the mics to record, I was sat there with... So you know, what are those delicious coffee biscuits that people have next to a coffee?
Oh. Oh, yeah, like they... Oh, no, people are going to be shouting at us. They're like Danish or something, are they?
Yes, and they come in little individual packets. And I found...
You can even get ice cream.
Yes, well,
flavour.
this is it. I had a pot of spread that you're supposed to put on toast. And,
Ooh.
And I was sat there with a spoon eating this bloody stuff like it was a yoghurt. I'm so disgusted in myself. I just couldn't help it. It's so tasty. But do you know what? I don't care. It was so tasty.
Hashtag worth it.
Hashtag worth it. But what have you been doing? What have you been watching? We've both been watching a show that I wanted to talk about because some mutual friends of ours or mutual acquaintances are in it, aren't they? And it's on BBC.
Yes.
It's on iPlayer right now. And just want to encourage everybody to watch it because it's brilliant. And it's called Alma's Not Normal.
Alma's Not Normal. And it's really good. It's written by and stars Sophie Willan, and I think what did she get? A BAFTA. She got a BAFTA for it. And it's got such a great cast, including friends of ours. And it's about Alma, who has recently been dumped and she doesn't have a way to pay her rent. So she's trying to find a job. And there's her mum who's recovering, or she's a heroin addict, and she's currently in some kind of rehab after some arson. I think she likes to set a fire. And then there's the granny. What's the granny called?
I can't remember. She's genius.
She's clad from head to toe in leopard print and is referred to as a 90s feminist. So she has pictures of Spice Girls on the wall and dildos in her living room. And it's just, isn't it a joy? It's so funny.
Brilliant. It's so funny. And it's one of those programmes that's so geniusly written that it manages to touch on these really dark, painful, traumatic experiences and yet make you laugh at the same time. Yeah. And it wasn't until the very last episode, and I don't want to put any spoilers out there for people who are going to watch it, but I got a proper lump in my throat. That bit where they were talking about just trying to break the cycle of trauma and poverty and bad life decisions and no choices that had just gone through all the women generation after generation in her family. And it just, it really got me. It was, kind of beautiful but hysterical all at the same time.
is it semi-autobiographical?
It
Is that
is.
reflective of her upbringing?
Massively reflective of her upbringing. Yeah. So
Right,
she
yeah.
had the drug addict mum. She had a life in and out of care. And actually, I don't know if you spotted in the very last episode, there's a cameo by Lem Sensei. Have you ever read, oh my God, if I just said his name wrong, who has written an amazing book about his own experience in care. And he's an amazing poet and author and writer and talks a lot about and campaigns a lot about the rights of people in care and coming out of care. And yeah. Anyway, it's worth a watch. It's
and out
brilliant.
into the real world. It's you're absolutely right that it does deal with very gritty.
Lem Sensei. Sorry.
There we go. Well done. And it's also set up north. And I know from chatting to friends who are from up north or who have studied up north, they're just like, oh my God, it just really takes them back. Like it's just so real. And but yeah, of course, and a typical northern thing as well, that it's just laced with self-effacing, is that what I mean? Humour, like self-deprecation. It's
like
just
self-deprecating.
That's what I mean, isn't it? And it's just so funny. And I want to give a shout out to our friend, a fellow voiceover artist, Dave Jones, who plays Alma's best friend's boss in her cafe.
Yes.
What's she called? He does a lot of just shouting at her, telling her, what's her name?
Jade Adams.
Yeah.
Jade Adams.
What's the character's name?
So she's a Bristolian, I think.
Oh, is she?
Oh, the character's name.
Because he's always like, fuck
God,
off.
I can't remember.
Fuck off, Alma.
Yeah.
He's very funny.
It's brilliant.
Get up off my floor, Alma.
He nails it.
The whole series is on BBC iPlayer. Definitely check it out. Also, something else I've done, which is very exciting. The other day, for the first time in a long time, I went to the cinema again. Because I've really missed going to see a film.
Oh, I love it. What did you go and see,
Getting
Gwen?
popcorn.
What did you go and see?
Went to see James Bond.
Yes.
So you went to see it as well,
I
didn't
went
you?
to see it as well. What did you think?
All right.
Because we've not spoken about this.
We've not spoken about this. So I have to say, I was a little distracted by the age difference between him and the leading female.
Classic Bond.
That, I think, classic Bond, but also he's getting older, but the ladies, they don't age beyond 36.
No.
Because I think they're taken out and shot. Is that what happens? to
They
actresses at
spontaneously
36?
combust when they hit 36.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I was quite distracted not only by the fact that, well, he is 53 and the leading lady was 36, but she looked much younger. She could have been 26. So I was just like, oh, please.
But one thing that they did do differently was that at least she had curves. Like, she wasn't your traditional waif, like 90s heroin chic type physique that sometimes goes hand in hand with this. Like, she did have curves, didn't she? And she did.
Well, I'm going to have to admit I didn't notice those curves because I think maybe I've got a different idea of what curves are. But that's
she's
good.
like had a hint of curve. I don't know why I feel like the need to defend her choice of casting here.
Now, I will make a point and say that Miss Moneypenny is 46, but she looks so incredible that you wouldn't think she's over 36.
Is she 46?
I mean, that's just... Yeah, exactly. You see, like, it's all very well having a 46-year-old in, but she does not look over 36.
Oh, my God. No, she's stunning.
And
although I saw her in an advert the other day and I was like, you're Miss Moneypenny. What are you doing an advert? Come on. Surely you don't need to do this.
Surely. Although we should do coffee like Brad and George. They're all at it, aren't they?
No, I think it was like for a bank, NatWest or something, and she was singing.
No.
No.
Oh, really? Are you sure it was her?
Sure it was her.
That doesn't sound right.
I'm sure it was her.
So anyway, I kind of really enjoyed it, but I was distracted by that, and that is something that distracts me now, I guess, not only as a feminist, but as a feminist who's now 46, that, you know, the absence of people like me on screen.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and but other than that, I thought it was great. What I did miss, I thought the baddie could have been badder.
I agree.
And I missed the relationship between Bond and the baddie because it was sort of dispersed a little because there were multiple baddies.
Yeah.
And also the fact that I hadn't watched Spectre, and I was like, oh my God, they keep referring to Spectre, and I did put out on social media afterwards to people to go watch Spectre first before you watch No Time to Die, because I worked out it came out 6 years ago. So, of course, we don't remember what the heck was going on. No. But anyway, what did you think?
I loved it. Same things about you, same things that you said about the female characters. And I mean, and this is nothing new with Bond, is it? But increasingly, we're more and more disappointed by that. And there's a big leap, isn't there? Suddenly, then you get people like Meryl Streep, that kind of age, but then there's no one in between the two. It's like, why not? Why is that? Anyway, I don't want to give any spoilers, so maybe I'm going to pause. Then I'm going to say something that's going to be a spoiler. So anybody who hasn't watched it or wants to watch it or doesn't want any spoilers, like, come back in.
Oh, that's tricky. That's really tricky.
I know.
Well, you say it and then we'll decide whether we leave it in.
Okay. I was surprised how emotional I felt when they and...
Actually, that was a massive spoiler. So, beep. I think we're going to cut that out.
I think so. Anyway.
But overall, you found it emotional.
Emotional, and we'll leave it at that. No more needs to be said.
So that wraps up our unofficial TV and movie guide.
Exactly. And just to show that we do things other than watch TV and go to the movies, I've just finished reading Sally Rooney, author of Normal People. I've just finished reading her new book called Beautiful World, Where Are You? And controversial.
Ooh.
I didn't like it at all.
Now,
it's boring.
You are not alone in that.
Really?
I think people are finding it... Well, a friend of mine who was reading it when we were away on holiday, she was finding it very difficult to get into.
Yes, really difficult to get into. I felt like, this sounds a very cynical thing to say, but I felt like with Normal People, the things that she was really praised with Normal People, she's kind of trying to do again, and it feels a bit forced. Like, for example, in Normal People, there was a lot of praise for how she approached the sex scenes, that it was really consensual and it was really different to the way that sex is normally portrayed on our screens. It was very kind of
communicative,
all of which are really great things. And she's kind of doing that again, because there's quite a lot of those scenes in this book. But it feels like she's just overdoing it a bit, because she had such a good response to it the first time. So it's just constantly like, is that okay? Is that okay? Do you like that? Do you like that? What about that? Is that okay? Oh, is everyone okay? Are we all okay? You're okay? I'm okay. It's like, oh, my life. Everyone's all right. Just move it on.
Get on with it.
Just get on with it.
Take a bra off.
Yeah. And just not much happens.
Well, isn't it also written in a different style? It's not written like a normal novel. Is it more like a script? Am I right?
Yeah, so she writes it. Other than there's elements where they're writing letters to each other, and that's the only bit that's written in first person. Everything else is written as if she's describing a scene, and she describes the characters in the scene, which are the main characters in the book, and she says, "You will never know what they're thinking in this moment, or we'll never fully understand how that comment made her feel." So you're left... You have that sensation as when you're watching a TV programme where you don't know what's going on inside the heads of the characters. But it's quite weird to have that.
But in a book, we're used to being told, aren't we?
Yeah, and also that's the beauty of literature, that you can get into their heads and know what they're thinking and feeling in the moment. But also she describes the setting of the scene in minute detail. For example, a WhatsApp conversation, she'll describe there's one tick, then there's two ticks. That means it's been delivered. Oh, then the ticks turn blue. That means that means she knows they've read the message. But she does this every single time a WhatsApp message gets sent. So although it works in one respect, in your mind's eye, you can see what's happening. It is like you're
visually that would work really well.
Yeah, it's like you've got a movie reel going in your mind, but it does get a bit tiresome after a while. It kind of takes you out of being emotionally absorbed in what happens, because you're too focused on the practical elements.
Because you're like, get on with it. Yeah, what a shame.
I know. But I'm reassured when I always hear that other people haven't enjoyed a book that I haven't enjoyed, because there's always a bit of you that thinks, is it just me? Did I not get it?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, just to give Sally Rooney, to make her feel a little bit better, I've just reread Normal People while I was on holiday. Well, in fact, not reread it. I read it for the first time. I had obviously seen the TV series last year with everybody else, fell in love with the characters along with everyone else. And then reading the book was a great experience. I wondered whether I'd be a little bored, because it's not that long ago, but I think enough time has gone past that I couldn't fully remember all the details. But also, there was a lot more detail in, obviously, the TV series that fleshed out or that kind of fleshed out what was happening in the book for me. And I had those characters in mind. I had those actors in mind. So it was great to go back and to read Normal People.
Brilliant.
So Sally Rooney, the highs and the lows.
The peaks and the troughs.
It's right up my podcast.
So, this is episode 17, Why We Need Adventure.
Indeed. And this episode, we are talking, as I mentioned earlier, to Belinda Kirk. Now, Belinda is an explorer, and she's done a lot of work as part of that in youth development. She's even managed remote trips for the likes of Ray Mears and Bear Grylls, the big names. She's also the author of a book called Adventure Revolution. But the reason why we are talking to her today is that she's the leading voice on promoting the benefits of adventure for well-being. She feels that the modern world has made us too averse to challenge and that this is having a negative impact on our physical and our mental health. So we know that one person's dog walk is another person's Everest. You know, what is adventurous changes depending on who you are and your frame of reference are. So we started our conversation with Belinda by asking her, what does she actually mean when she's talking about adventure?
There's two ways that I define it. One would be stepping out of your ordinary, stepping out of the everyday that, you know, no matter how good our ordinary lives are, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with them, but stepping away from them is a good experience every now and then, just to get perspective and to have an adventure, push ourselves outside of our comfort zone. So I think stepping out of our
routine,
out of our routines, out of our everyday rules and the ways that we do things, and just doing something differently, doing something different or differently is really, really exciting and so enriching. Another way to look at adventure is that I think there's three elements of adventure that sort of come together, especially when talking about well-being. Adventure is this idea of challenge. I think challenge is a big part of it. But also, along with that comes uncertainty and also adversity. Adversity is the hardest one to sell to people. You know, it's not like we haven't all been having a difficult 18 months. But chosen adversity, chosen challenge is different to, and I'm not talking about trauma, I'm talking about pushing ourselves
yeah, I mean, the word adversity is a little bit intimidating, isn't it? Yeah. What does that mean?
No, so you're right, and I should pick up on that a bit more. So when I talk about adversity, I mean when you get out of your comfort zone, it's uncomfortable, and we should embrace occasionally, depending on who we are and how we want to do it, choosing to become uncomfortable. Adventurers go on adventures because despite knowing that there will be some difficulty or uncomfortableness along the way, because they know that the greater feelings of achievement and excitement and feeling alive and all of the, you know, it's worth it basically. And so choosing to go outside your comfort zone, even though you know that there is, it's going to be difficult and there's going to be certain adversity, it's still worth doing. I think most of the important things in our lives are not easy; they're difficult.
If you don't live this sort of lifestyle, where do you start with this?
It's a really good question, because I think it's so easy to be intimidated and not start, no matter how much the call to adventure is there. So the brilliant things you could do could be, you could just walk to work a different way each time. You know, you could, if you go and walk your dog, you could decide, I'm going to explore the city or explore the area just outside of the town. Rather than I'm going to do the same thing in the same way, I'm going to do it differently. But you can go further. You could try something new. You could sign up to a kayaking lesson or a climbing lesson and just try something that you think, I probably can't do it, but I'm going to try it. And then you will surprise yourself and you will be able to do it, I promise. Or at least you'll have a good old go and you'll be better than you think you are, probably. And you'll have a good laugh along the way. So, I mean, there's so many things. You could camp in your garden, you can take your kids or go with some friends or go on your own and camp. That's a huge adventure if you've never slept out on your own before. There's loads of ways. I mean, in the book I go through lots of things. I mean, journeys are a great thing. And you could talk about multi-day journeys when you walk a whole, like I'm walking the Southwest Coast Path at the moment. You could walk, 630 miles on the Southwest Coast Path, or you could walk for a weekend and follow a different walk. You could walk around. You could do a circle of your town, for example. Find a way to do it. Footpaths and roads and tracks and whatever. There's so many ways. I think you just have to be geared up and wanting to find those ways and realising why it's not only fun, but it's also good for you. It's enriching. And then you find a way.
I heard someone say recently about how good it is for us to change our routines. So to mix up the everyday, like you said, taking a different route to walk or taking the dog on a different loop or doing the loop backwards, how that's good for our brains to not do things the same way all the time.
And I remember reading, there's a movement called Do Something Differently, or DSD. And I remember writing an article about them a few years ago. And they even brought it down to, even when you're in the supermarket, just chuck a few random things into your basket. Because we're such creatures of habit, aren't we? I buy all the exact same things every time I go to the supermarket. So it's like going down an aisle backwards and grabbing something you wouldn't usually
get.
Oh, what adventure! Or, you walk past this cafe all the time and you think, that looks nice. And then one day, just go into it and just try, eat somewhere new, do something different. I can see that all of mine is slightly related around food. But it's...
I think there's some psychology around that.
Yeah. So talking about the psychology, what is that doing to us about, doing something different, changing things up?
So there's several reasons it's good for us. But one of the main is I've talked about challenge. If you imagine we all have our comfort zone, and that's where we spend a lot of our time. But hopefully that's not where we spend all of our time. That's when things can get a bit sort of staid. So if you think of a circle around yourself, that's your comfort zone. That's the routines and the actions and the behaviours and the people that you hang out with and all the sort of familiar stuff in your life. That is your comfort zone. When you do something new or differently, you step out of your comfort zone, and that's where you learn things. That's where you find out what you're capable of doing. That's where you build your confidence. That's where the magic happens, I think. The great thing is that when you step out of your comfort zone, you don't just step back into your comfort zone and retreat again. Your comfort zone stretches. And if you think about it, your life is enriching. Your life is expanding because you're expanding your experiences. And I think adventure is wonderful for doing that. But it's the key to adventuring is that you learn lessons like that and then you take them back to the rest of your life. And then you live more adventurously in your career and your relationships. And it's that empowering kind of that getting used to being uncomfortable and expanding your comfort zone. And that's where adventure's so exciting. And that's why doing things differently is so enriching.
That is such a big takeaway from all of this, isn't it? That it's more than just the enjoying the moment of doing the activity. It's the impact it has on the rest of your life and the way you approach the rest of the challenges. That's really thought-provoking, actually.
Yeah, because if you're getting that sense of achievement and that sense of look at what I can do, or look at how different my day-to-day can be, it makes you open to possibility, and it does also open you up to new opportunities. When you go to new places, you meet new people, you try new things, so you can create some real positive changes in your life, can't you?
And I think that's why the first step's the hardest, because when you've not, especially, let's face it, we've all been so restricted recently. If you've not stepped out of your comfort zone, out of your routines for a while, the first step is the hardest one, because you've forgotten that you get that feedback, it makes us go more and more inwards if we're not careful, if we don't push ourselves. So we choose to go inwards or we choose to go outwards. I don't think there's much staying static. It doesn't happen. And I think if you can push yourself, you can stretch yourself into the stretch zone or out of your comfort zone, you learn or remind yourself, or you learn for the first time, that actually it is uncomfortable, but there's a positive feedback. There's a reason you put yourself in that position, because, wow, you feel most alive, or you learn something new, or there's this richness. So I think it's good to know that because it is so intimidating to start, and I think that when you do start, it gets easier. That's the most empowering thing to know. If you're sort of sitting on the sidelines, it will get easier. Every step gets easier, and then easier, and then easier, because you've got all this feedback each time.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see over the last 12, 18 months how sales of things like tents, inflatable kayaks, paddle boards, all of this equipment for getting out and doing things have just gone through the roof because of lockdowns, the various lockdowns we've had. Apparently people have just been trying to do more activities in the UK, which I think have probably taken them away from the beach beds in sort of Spain or whatever, and actually into the rivers and the hills and trying to do more activities. Maybe that's a kind of plus side of what we've gone through over the last year.
I think there's just something human there's something very intrinsically human about hearing and this call to adventure and wanting to do stuff like that. And I just think it's just the most natural feeling. The reason we don't always answer our call to adventure is because we don't think of adventure as being important. We think of it as being a frivolous and like a luxury. And that's what I'm trying to do with my book and with my work, is to say, no, it's an essential part of being human, and therefore it's an essential part of our well-being and of our flourishing, and therefore we need it. We need it in our schools, in our lifestyles, in our public policies. We need to recognise it like we recognise nature is important. We need to recognise adventure is important because it's so natural to us. And I think people have just had hard times, and obviously we've all had such a challenging time. I think it's just like, what do we want to do? Well, we want to do this stuff.
I wonder why we've lost touch a little bit with that kind of innate call to adventure that's kind of been hardwired into us since caveman times, you could say. I mean, how do you think our lives, certainly our Western lives, sort of a big sweeping statement, but do you think they've been over-sanitised to a certain extent?
Yeah, and I think things have been made more comfortable and convenient. That doesn't mean easier. I think things are harder mentally for us than ever, because it's so far from how we're living so far from how we evolved to live. I researched a lot of evolutionary psychology for the book, and we're not supposed to. We're supposed to be challenged. Our brains are supposed to be challenged with variety and play and fun, and we're supposed to be pushed, but in different ways. And so living very routinized lives is actually harmful for us, and obviously the stresses that we have in the modern world as well. So I think we've come so far from where we evolved to live. We're so focused on productivity that routine and so on allows us to be more and more productive, but it's actually sort of cutting out all the uncertainty and all the adventure in life. And so I think that's one real thing, is this idea of productivity. We've got to be productive. Our children have to be productive every minute of the day. We've all got to be, we've got to have rules and routines and diaries. And I'm terrible. I'm constantly over busy. I have to constantly make time for freedom and adventure. And I'm trying desperately to do that for my son, although I want to book him up for rugby and football and climbing. And this, I mean, some of that is adventurous, I suppose, the climbing. But I need to give him freedom as well. And so I think there's a huge push in that direction. Our society's become very much like that, but also we're very worried about physical safety. And so health and safety is so blanketing that we forget that it's not just about physical safety. What about mental health? We've got the balance, I think, a bit wrong. And I'm not saying we should put ourselves or our children in harm's way on purpose, but I think we need to realise that, that there's this balance, and we're sort of, I think we've gone off.
Do you know, I was just thinking, when we were doing, in our last series, we did like a grounding episode and we did forest bathing. So we did a lot of going out and being in nature. And I've moved house and I do have a garden, but I do spend less time outside than I did in my last place. And recently there were some shooting stars, or there's some asteroids going on. So a friend and I, we went out into the garden in the dark and stood there looking up at the stars. And I was just like, this is something I so rarely do. And it did feel like a mini adventure. It did feel like, I'm like, every night I'm sat in my living room watching telly or, doing something else. Whereas I could be... How easy is this to just step out into my garden and look at the stars? And I kind of think that even when we do know the benefits of nature, we could be in it a lot more, couldn't we?
I think, yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It's changing habits. But I think the more we know that it's good for us, the more we make efforts. I think intrinsically we all know that nature's good for us. And also I think that we all have, as I said, most of us, at least, if not all of us, can recognise we've got this call to adventure. Every time I go off on adventures, everyone's like, "Oh, can I come along? Or can I jump in can I hide in your suitcase?" But they feel that it's a frivolous thing to try and go off and do adventurous stuff. But I think once we recognise that it isn't, but it's actually important, part of who we are, all of us, then I think we make more time for it.
What's this before me? A new kind of jam. It's not my usual, it's a loganberry jam. I'm not sure I know what a loganberry is. A new hip vibe, massive with the kids. I question if I'm ready for this loganberry thing. Too early in the day for such brave adventuring, but I've run out of marmalade and there's no strawberry jam. Might have to try it, there's no other plan. Ooh, I like it. Yeah, I think you would too. Giving things a try is such a nice thing to do. Hooby-dooby-doo, hooby-dooby-doo. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Belinda, about if we could talk about being scared. This probably ties in with what we've been saying already, but this emotion of feeling scared, I think a lot of people will do anything to avoid that, or they'll see that as a warning sign to stop what they're doing, which often is the right response. But is it okay to feel scared?
Yeah, fear. Understanding fear is something that I've experienced through adventures, and also it's driven me to research a lot more because I'm really wanting to understand. So fear is just a natural response. It's a physical response. It's basically the fight or flight response, which I think a lot of us have heard at school and stuff. That is what fear is. Essentially, it's alerting you to a situation. And fear is there to help you. It's there to tell you, here's some it's just an information source, but we think of it sometimes as something that stops us. And that's where it's not helpful to us always. It's more that it should alert us to say, hey, this is something to take serious. This is something to think, to focus on, this situation. And so over the years, I've been in fearful situations. Again, like I was saying earlier, adventure teaches me tools I can take into life. What it's taught me is that fear is a preparation. It's a preparation for peak performance. So the reason you have flight or fight response is because your body gets prepared to be, I say, superhuman. It's like, I call fear my superpower. So fear, actually, when you get fearful, your digestive system shuts down, all the blood rushes to your to your muscles. It makes you super fast, super strong. You hear about, mothers pulling vehicles off, or people pulling vehicles off other people and stuff.
Children.
Yeah. You hear about this sort of superhuman behaviour. Also, all of your senses become super alert. So you've got super hearing and super eyesight. you can see it as a preparation for peak performance instead of it being something that stops you. And so when I go into adventures, taught me that, but it means that I do things like public speaking. You get up in front of a few hundred people, you're actually terrified, but you're also saying, I'm not terrified. Well, I am terrified, but it's all preparing me. This fear that I'm feeling is like, it's my superpower, and it's, yes, I'm scared, but also I'm prepared, and I'm going to do a better job because I'm scared than if I was just kind of like lackadaisical about the whole thing. So it helps me to reframe, and I think doing things that make you a bit scared every now and then, and you don't have to be terrified. I'm not talking about climbing cliffs without ropes or anything.
Off you go, everybody.
You don't have to be Alex Honnold kind of thing. But just experiencing that and understanding that you can cope with fear is step one. Then understanding that actually it's about preparing you to give your best performance. So if you know, even if it's just fear of failing or fear of looking like a fool because you can't stand up on your paddleboard and keep falling off in front of all your friends. Whatever it is, it actually, you can see it as a you can reframe it. And that's very, very powerful because you can then, that can change how you approach other situations in life.
Do you know what? I've often used fear as a gauge for whether I should do something or not. And often if somebody asks me to do something, especially if it's public speaking or to do something which is definitely going to push me out of my comfort zone, and I feel this fear inside me, I know that I have to say yes. I know that that's the response. And actually talking about fear and the impacts that it has, a few years ago, I was feeling really stuck in a rut, and I just had this overwhelming sense that I needed to do something to scare myself, to get myself like out of my rut. And I spoke to somebody who was a shaman, and they'd gone through this shamanic induction ritual where they'd been buried alive overnight. And
oh my God,
I know, with a breathing hole going up to the surface. And I was like, yes, I need to do this. I need to be buried alive for the night in order to get me out of my rut. And I told my mum this story. She's like, you are not doing that. If you do that, I'm going to have to come and sit next to you all night long to make sure you're okay. She said, if you want to scare yourself, why don't you just go and camp up on the Preselles by yourself where we live? And I was like, no way. I would rather be buried alive than go and camp on the Preselles by myself. And she said, and I told my friend the shaman, he goes, in which case, that is what you should do. So anyway, cut to, I went up and camped by myself. I had friends go up with me, help light a fire and leave me up there. But for weeks in advance, I was absolutely terrified. I would look at this hill. Wait. It's called the Dragon's Back, Carmeni. It's got all these rocks on top that look like a dragon's back. I kept looking up with it, and it with a shiver of fear through me, knowing that I had to do it. And then when I finally did it, the moment my friends left me up on this hill, howling like wolves as they went down because they're bastards, as soon as I was left up there by myself, I just felt this feeling of calm. And I realised that the thing I was scared about was other people. And I realised there were no other people up here. And I felt safe. I felt held. I ended up like at one point standing atop a rock with my arms outstretched, thanking nature for looking after me. And I came down that next day, like skipping down the hill, and felt so good as a result. And yeah, it really, and I ended up writing an article about it, and it is exactly what you're saying, isn't it? That we push ourselves, we feel this fear, we do it anyway, and we come away feeling more alive.
Yeah, do you know, I love that you did that. I think if you can do 24, if you can do overnight on your own, if you can do 24 hours on your own in nature, then actually it's the biggest empowering step you can do. Because then you can do multiple days, can't you? You can do anything, really. And I think this idea of feeling most alive, literally the quote that I hear the most, the phrase that comes back to me the most when I talk to people about why do you adventure? Why do you feel that you need to make time for adventure? What do you get out of it? I feel most alive, or I feel alive. literally is the thing I've heard more than anything. I heard it so often I started to close it, start to stop recognising it, and then it's like, no, this is actually the core. One of the big reasons about why adventure is so important. Yeah, no, I love it.
And actually, something that makes you feel alive shouldn't be put in the box of frivolous, nice, lucky you if you've got the time to do it. Something that makes you, that's that powerful and makes you feel really alive. That should be really given a priority, shouldn't it? We should be carving out time to make sure we do that.
I think that's why it's so important, because I've read a lot about positive psychology, and it's about filling your lives with actions and activities that bring positive emotion, that help you build you up rather than break you down, and all of the positive feelings that you get from adventuring, like feeling most alive. I mean, we look at the mental health crisis that we're facing, and there are obviously some very good things like CBD and traditional psychology, traditional ways of helping people. Those are not wrong, but there's also positive psychology and this idea of looking towards positive things that you can do to behaviours and routines, behaviours that you can constantly put into your life, of the variety of routines, that you can build yourself to be more flourishing, which is really, really interesting. And a better way of looking at it for a lot of people. For me, I know I'm not a talking therapy kind of person. I've tried it, and I'm not saying that it doesn't work, but for me, doing something, being involved, tangible, it works for me a lot more. And so going on adventures and building myself up in that way, adventure has been my therapy. And then I've recognised it's been therapy for so many others.
Thank you so much to Belinda. That was really brilliant to talk to her and really inspiring. We both came away feeling really inspired, I think, didn't we? Mm-hmm. And for people who want to find out more, just a reminder, her book is called Adventure Revolution, The Life-Changing Power of Choosing Challenge. And you can find it in all good bookstores, both online and on the high street. And also Belinda mentioned her company Explorers Connect, where normal people can just go and meet other like-minded people who want to get involved in some more exciting, challenging things. So you can go and check that out as well. That's explorersconnect.com.
Marvellous. So, of course, as per usual, what we like to do is go and try these things ourselves and report back to say how it was for us. Now, we were both sorely tempted by the 24-hour solo in nature that Belinda suggested that we do. However, it wasn't as easy in practice, was it, Kate?
No. When we came off our chat with Belinda, I was so up for doing this. I was 100% adamant I want to go and do this, because going bivouacking or sleeping outdoors, doing something like that had been on my hit list of things I've wanted to do for so long. In fact, I think I've mentioned it on this podcast before that I wanted to go and do this.
Yes.
But we didn't quite get our act together.
We were so close, but we just couldn't quite fit it in, unfortunately, in time. But we have done other stuff instead, haven't we?
We have. I was going to say, Belinda's going to be listening to this going, oh, come on, guys, you're supposed to be supporting the cause here.
You had one bloody job. Go outside into nature. But I think what we're doing here is reflecting real life, right? It's not actually always practical to go out by yourself into nature for 24 hours. But I feel like it is something that I will do at some point.
Yeah. And also, you've just made a really good point there, because the whole point of us talking with Belinda was that we're going to have a range. We know we have a range of people who listen to this podcast, and some people already will be out and about doing things that might seem adventurous, whether that's mountain biking or kayaking or hiking or whatever it is that they find exciting and exhilarating. And other people won't, and they never will do. But the point of what we're talking about is making changes to your life so that you still get that feeling of having shaken up your routine, of having challenged yourself. and having sort of stepped out of your comfort zone. And that challenge can be as much as, I don't know.
It can be very little, as you will soon find out.
Yeah. Exactly. It can be really little, but it's just enough to kind of shake up your pattern of thinking, isn't it? And to get out of those patterns of doing it.
But even though we are talking about little things, you actually did go and do something very brave, Kate.
I did, and it felt brave because it was really scary. So I'm lucky in that my whole life I have done a lot of sort of outdoor activity things, and I do get exactly what Belinda's saying about how it makes you feel alive, and it makes, whenever I do something like that, whether it's going on a long hike or whether it's doing something else, it does make me feel like the best version of myself. Not as in I'm being brilliant, but I just feel the truest, most freest version of myself. But one thing that I've always been scared of is the sea, which sounds a bit nutty because I like to go surfing. I'm not very good. I just hang around in the shallows, but a big sea. And I had been signed up with some friends, and I think I had mentioned this on the podcast previously, to do this mile swim.
We mentioned this in series 2, yeah.
We mentioned it, to do this mile swim. The plan was that I was going to do loads of training. I was going to be like super athlete by the time I got down to doing it. I would just nail it. I wouldn't even notice that I'd stepped off the shore. This did not happen, my friends. None of this training actually took place anywhere other than in my mind. So I was really scared. And right up to about 10 minutes before getting in the water, I still wasn't convinced I was going to do it. And so many people were saying to me, this is a stupid idea. Like, you shouldn't do this. You've never swum that far in a swimming pool, let alone in the sea. What are you doing?
Well, you and I had this very conversation, because where is the mile swim? It's off the southwest coast of England, isn't it? It's and you go out and around an island. Have I made that up?
Yeah, there's a little place called Burr Island, which is just off the South Devon coast, and you swim round that. But you can't stop halfway. You can't just have a sit and a relax. You know, once you're in, you're committed, and you swim all the way around it.
Yeah, and you and I had a conversation about it, and you were saying how it was coming up, and you hadn't done any of the training for it. And I was like, well, you can't do it because you're going to be out in deep water, and that's the thing. When you're knackered and you're in waves and you're against a current, what can you do if you're in deep water? You can't just rest. You can't just sit at the side for a minute. So at the end of that conversation, we were like, yeah, okay, you're not going to do it. And you were like, no, it would be ridiculous. Cut to
me wading out in the sea going, well, looks like I'm doing it, folks. Here I go.
So what happened?
Well, I was with a friend, and we just made a pact that we were going to stick together. There was loads and loads of safety boats. So even if I'd got into trouble, there were safety boats everywhere. I had a tow float, which is a big kind of inflatable thing, which I know it's not a life-saving thing, but if I'd got absolutely knackered, I could have just hung on to that until one of these boats came and got me. So I felt I didn't feel like I was being reckless, because what Belinda's saying, isn't she? That, like, challenging yourself to go and do something, or shaking things up and doing something differently. There's a void between that and then going and doing something stupid where you're going to kill yourself. That's not what she's talking about.
Don't actually risk your life. Yeah.
Don't actually kill yourself. So I kind of reassured myself that it wasn't stupid, that I wasn't going to die, and that I was just scared because it was out of my comfort zone. So I just stuck with my friend. And I just kept on going, and I kept on going, and I kept on going, and kept on going, until eventually I came to the other end and I'd completed it. And I felt euphoric when I'd finished it, because I had done something that was scary, genuinely scary for me. I had pushed myself beyond my kind of physical comfort zone, and I'd done it all just with my own physical body, you know, it just relied on me and me alone. And I was on a high.
But it wasn't easy, was it? It wasn't easy. Like you say, you just kept swimming. There was some struggle in there, wasn't there?
There was. I swallowed all of the sea and then a little bit more after that.
Yeah. And did you have a moment of thinking, I'm actually not going to be able to do this while you were swimming?
Well, when we got round to the back of the island, the current was going in one direction, the wind was going in the other direction, so there were these big peaks, and that was the moment we were just swimming. You don't feel like you're making any progress, just swimming on the spot. Oh. And I did think, I'm beginning to get really tired now. And then from there on in, it was hard. And then when I could see the beach, there was something psychological about being able to see the beach. It's like, right, I've finished now. I need to stop swimming now. But actually, I still had a long way to go.
Right.
But just the psychology of being able to see the end made me feel like it's like when you need a wee and you can't get your keys in the door, and then the fact that you can't get your keys in the door makes you super desperate in a way that you never would have been before. It's that kind of feeling.
Just like needing a wee. So what she said about when you push yourself out of your comfort zone, you don't come back to your comfort zone, you come back to a widened zone, don't you? Did that make sense to you? Like, do you feel different after achieving
100%, 100%, because that makes complete sense what she said, that you come back and it's kind of broken down any fear that you had that you just can't do it. Now you know you can do it. I felt so proud of myself, and like I wanted that moment just to go on. Like I wanted to do something else. I wanted to make it fueled the fires of me wanting to do more. You want to keep that feeling going, so you want to do something else, and it gives you confidence. Yeah, I felt on a high.
Oh, that's amazing. You felt alive. That's what it's all about, isn't
alive,
it?
Baby.
That is so good. I'm so proud of you. Yeah. That is really bloody awesome.
Thank you, love. It was really exciting. But I want to hear about what you've got to say, because you've taken a different approach to this.
Yes,
you've decided to kind of find ways of bringing that kind of doing things differently into the everyday.
Exactly, yeah. I thought I would go for lo-fi adventure. And
I like it.
I'm really stretching it by you calling it adventure at all. But basically, what we spoke to with her, I referred to that movement DSD, which is actually do something different, and which I read an article about years and years ago, and it is just about making really small changes in your day to day that will just lift you out of your rut. And it's just because your brain. So our brain is always creating. Our brain is very efficient. It's always creating habits, and it's always creating shortcuts. So that's how we can, drive home from work and we don't remember the drive because we've done it so many times. We're just in autopilot. So we're in autopilot with a lot of the things we do, because otherwise, gosh, it'd be exhausting if we had to really think about everything. So the idea is to just shake it up a bit you can do really small things to create difference. So for example, don't laugh. The other day, instead of going to Tesco, I went to Aldi.
Yeah.
So I just went to a different shop. So I couldn't just automatically go down the same aisles to the same places where I know the yogurt is, I know the bread is. I had to think the whole way around. And also you're like, different brands and different foods. And you end up bringing home different things. So that made me feel good. Another thing I did was I have pretty much the same routine every morning. I get out of bed, I go get my phone, I sit down, make coffee, I hang out with the cat, I feed her. I do basically exactly the same thing. The other day I just got out of bed and got straight in the shower. And it's just
crazy cat.
Well, exactly right. You kind of laugh and you think, God, what an adventure. But it is. It's doing those just tiny little changes to just fuck up your routine, and it just starts your day differently. And here's one. If you're laughing at that, you're going to howl at this one. I swapped my bins around in the corner. In the corner I had my recycling on the left and my rubbish on the right, and I swapped them around. And let me tell you, every single time I go to the bin I have to think. And
have you got a licence for that kind of reckless behaviour?
Do consult an expert before you try any of these things.
I'm laughing, but I do know the point that you're making, and it is a really valid one.
Yes.
It's just switch your brain on.
Exactly, it's little changes, and I do feel that every time I go to the bin, I'm having to stop and think, and it's like and so it is all those little things like we were talking to her about, and supermarket came into that as well, where you just put something new in, because we're all creatures of habit. We all buy the same things every single time we go. Yes. Whack in something different. Yeah,
taking a different route to work.
Exactly.
And it is a really good point, because otherwise people get turned off where they're like, well, I'm never blooming going to go to the Himalayas, sort of. And she makes the point about kind of this term adventure seeming really, I don't mean exclusive. What do I mean? That word where people are...
Well, it's not accessible to everyone, is it?
Not accessible,
what you mean?
Yeah, and it's like a closed club. Like there's a sort of an elite people that can bring that into their life. But that's not for us normal people. You know, we don't get to do things like that. But it can be whatever you want it to be. It's just the impact, the reaction that your brain has to it. So whether it's, you know, checking out the wild aisles of Aldi rather than Tesco, terrifying experience, or whether it's going, you know, mountain biking, if you come away feeling sharper, then that's worth it.
Yes, you do. I'm going to admit I probably have not achieved the same level of feeling alive again like you did, but all of these little things do add up to just creating newness and shaking up the routine a bit. And I think that's what we've got to do. We're creating wider comfort zones. I mean, if you can aim towards at some point going and spending 24 hours solo, or, you know, doing something new like co-steering or mountain climbing or whatever, absolutely do it. But meanwhile, just do something different.
Do something different. I like it. It's going to be my mantra.
Yeah. And I actually thought to myself, I want to do something different every day. Like, so just making a little difference to your routine every day, I think could have big changes. Just you wait.
Thank you for listening to Write Up My Podcast. We love to hear from you, so do keep in touch. You can email us at writeupmypodcast@gmail.com. And also you can find us on Instagram and Twitter, and you can follow us or find us at WriteUpMy.
And if you are on Apple, or if you'd like to pop over to Apple Podcasts, then please do leave us a rating and a review, because that will make us look awesome. And please do share us with your friends so more people can hear the wondrous ways to feel good.
And if you just want more, then don't hesitate to head over to our Patreon site, which is patreon.com/writeupmypodcast, where you can find all sorts of extra content for your perusals. And thank you must go out to our incredible team,
without whom this would not be possible. On the music, it is Andy Grimes. Creating our beautiful artwork is Erica Francis George. Check her out on Insta at Erica Francis George.
We'll be back in a couple of weeks with our next episode, where we'll be talking all about listening and being heard. But meanwhile, keep trying things
to make you feel good. Bye-bye.
Tell me, did you like the podcast, Brian?
No!
Oh.
If, unlike Brian, you thought our podcast was really great, then don't hold back. Like, subscribe, and tell your mate. But if, like Brian, you thought our podcast wasn't fun, then just keep quiet. Don't feel the need to tell anyone. We'd love to hear from you if you've got some thoughts to share. Such rich and lovely views that all should be aware of. But I hope you liked our podcast and you thought it was really great. And if you did, like, subscribe, and tell your mate. 'Cause we don't need grumpy pants bringing everybody down. No, we don't need negative Nellies making people frown. No. So I hope you liked our podcast and you thought it was really great. And if you did, like, subscribe, and tell your mate.